Chisa was just revealed to be coming in Wuthering Waves version 2.8, and that got me thinking about what Chisa might potentially do. So that's what this video is about. I'm going to be speculating whatever Chisa's kit might be, based on currently available information and just my own ramblings. So let's start off, as usual, with what I believe her attribute and weapon type are going to be. First, I want to talk a bit about her weapon type because, well, I am a lot more confident on this one, let's just say that. Within various pieces of art, we've seen Chisa using some type of scissors sword. Some people believed it to be more of a chainsaw, but no, it's very clear in the newest art that it is very much a scissor-like sword. It even has the sort of markings that a ruler would have on it. So yeah, she definitely has a sword-esque weapon. But what kind of sword is the question here? Because, well, within WuWa we have two different sword-esque weapons, being obviously the base sword and then the broadblade. Chisa's weapon definitely looks to be rather large, so my instinct wants to go towards broadblade. But here's the thing, we know what kind of people Chisa is going to be tailoring towards. She definitely seems to be very inspired by classic anime tropes. And that makes me think that Kuro is gonna try to appeal to this demographic by making Chisa a nimble sword fighter. Because, well, that just makes sense. It fits a lot more with the era that she seems to be inspired by. But remember, this is still the game that turned Zani into a Gauntless user. So really, I can't expect anything. She could just still be a Broadblade user and justify it by saying that she takes her big sword and splits it into two small swords. Because thank you, WuWa. You always do this, and now I'm never confident about anything I say ever again. So before I go into a spiral about Wuthering Waves and their weapon choices, I want to talk a bit about what her attribute could be. And here I do still have a solid theory, but it's definitely got less basis than me saying, oh, she's gonna be either a sword or a broadblade user, because unlike the weapon type, we don't see this one on her splash art. I believe Chisa is going to be a Havoc character, however. My primary evidence for this is the Leviathan Echo that we have within the game right now. The Leviathan Echo currently only exists to be a 4-cost on Galbrenna's build, but as we know with WuWa, 4-costs rarely go unused. Sure, sometimes we might have a 3-cost that isn't really used much, for example the Karasaur, which ended up being completely useless, but 4-costs almost always find a user, and Leviathan will be no different. Leviathan deals Havoc damage, and buffs Havoc and Liberation damage, so that is going to be the primary basis upon which my Chisa theory is based. There is more to this Echo, being primarily a gimmick based around Havoc Bane, but I really don't want to talk about Havoc Bane right now. I would love to save that more for the gameplay section. So yeah, based on my current theories, Chisa is going to either be a Sword Havoc character or a Broadblade Havoc character. My primary issue with this is that we already got very good Havoc characters within the version 2.x pipeline, being primarily Flova, but we also got Cantarella and Rochia for the Flova team. Although Rochia is about to get kicked out by Choyuan, but that's beside the point. We've already been getting a ton of Havoc characters within Renacita, especially so when you consider that the last 5-star before Renacita's release was also Havoc. So I can definitely see Kuro pulling a switcheroo and just saying she's not Havoc at all. Leviathan could just be used on a different character, and he could be pulling another Fenrico situation, where it takes a hot minute in order for you to actually get the user of the Echo. Because Fenrico was released in 2.5, and then Choyuan, who uses Fenrico, is being released in 2.7. Honestly, considering how much Glacio has been completely ignored, I won't be entirely shocked if they decide to make her a Glacio character. But that's beside the point. But I am going to be running with the theory that she is a Havoc Sword character going forward. But what kind of Havoc Sword character? What would be her primary gimmick? Or rather, what is her kit going to do? Well, I'm gonna be basing this theory off of the Leviathan Echo again. Because, like I said earlier, Leviathan has a gimmick that does support the use of Havoc Bane, which makes me very terrified. You see, around the release of Cardathea, I made this video about how I believe negative status was a bad thing for the game, because creating characters focused solely on negative status would make characters more and more exclusive to certain archetypes, and because there were no other negative status characters, DPSs that revolve around negative status would very often be left with just mediocre alternatives that led to a very large drop in damage. So Chisa could be one of two things. Either she is the solution to this problem, which I heavily doubt is gonna happen. The negative status pipeline has gotten Kuro way too much money for them to do that, or she's just going to be reinforcing this issue even more. Because here's the thing with Chisa. I believe she's either going to be a sub DPS or a main DPS. The Leviathan Echo gives Resonance Liberation bonus and Havoc bonus, so that means Chisa's damage output is at least going to be somewhat viable, and that's usually not how pure supports go. For example, Fallacy of No Return gives a team-wide buff, so I think it's pretty fair to assume that Chisa is either going to be a main DPS or a sub DPS. And here's the dilemma that they're facing. With the previous two negative status characters, they released a sub DPS before the main DPS, and I don't know if they're gonna break this trend with Chisa. Chisa is so incredibly popular that I honestly can't see Kuro making her anything except a main DPS. When Lupa ended up not being a main DPS, people rioted. Now imagine when they do it with the most popular character of the second half in version 2.x. I really just don't see them making Chisa anything other than a main DPS. But if she's gonna be a Havoc Bane focused main DPS, and there's no Havoc Bane focused sub DPS, that could lead to two things. Either she's going to be incredibly mediocre on release, which, let's just say, no, they're not doing that, Kuro isn't stupid. Or they're gonna make her actually self-sufficient, which would be very nice. If Chisa is a self-sufficient character within the negative status genre of characters, that would mean that most of my problems with negative status would have been addressed, because that's my number one issue with negative status. Characters feel like they rely too much on each other, but if Chisa doesn't have this problem, it would be a very good direction for negative status. But like I said earlier, I feel like Kuro has made way too much money off of this negative status gimmick for them to stop now. Zani and Cardathea were two of the most well-performing banners of all time, so why would they chicken out with another incredibly popular character that they just know people are gonna pull for anyway? From a game design perspective, I'd be all for it, but from a business perspective, they just have no reason to make Chisa more player-friendly. So yeah, I really don't know what they're gonna do with Chisa. Almost every idea I have ends up sounding unrealistic in some way. She can't be a main DPS because there's no dedicated sub DPS for her yet. They're definitely not gonna make her player friendly enough to not need her signature sub DPS, and I just don't see her being a sub DPS because she's too popular. I also can't see her being a pure support because the Leviathan Echo gives damage to Chisa, and pure supports usually don't have good damage output. So I really don't know what direction they're going into. Maybe she still is a pure support, but she still has personal damage and less buffing. Or maybe she still has personal damage and higher field time. Something like the Arrow Rover, who is meant to be a pure support character, but has somewhat okay damage, which they trade in for a longer field time. But again, I don't really see Kuro doing this. Chisa is way too popular. I don't think they're gonna make her a support at all. It just doesn't make sense for them to do that from a business perspective. People got mad when they did it to Lupa. People got mad when they did it to Choyuan. So imagine if they do it to Chisa. People are going to be absolutely outraged, and I don't think Kuro wants that type of heat. Kuro tends to just not have a backbone on things. They really just buckle under any kind of pressure, and whenever the community complains about something en masse, they try their best to do damage control. But when the issue with a character is how their kit is designed and it requires a full rework, that's gonna be way too much work. Kuro doesn't want that type of heat. So yeah, forgive me for saying this, but I don't think she's gonna be a support either. But those are just my opinions on Chisa. Let me know what you think of her in the comments down below. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, join my Discord, which is linked in the description. Additionally, if you just want to see more of me, you can check out my second channel, which is also linked in the description. I don't post much, but when I do, it's kinda just whatever I feel like. But that'll be all from me. Peace.